In this example, I have a table here where I have information on devil hunters. And if we look at Denji here, he's worked with public safety, but he's recently gone independent, which means that in my tblPerson table, where I simply have the most recent state of the person, I can see that Denji is a part of the independent department. My problem here is that when I want to present this, I want the first 3 rows for Denji to be public safety, but the most recent one should be independent. When I create a relationship between the tblPerson table and the tblRecords table, because tblPerson only has Denji in his most recent department, that's going to cause some problems. I want these 3 rows to only belong to public safety, and I'm going to show both what happens if I discard this, and I'm going to show what happens when I don't take this into account. My table itself is pretty simple. I simply want to have my date. I forgot to add the hierarchy, which I've now solved off screen. I want the year and the month, and because my date calendar goes from the start of the year 95 to the end of 96, I have a lot more rows than I need. But these will all be filtered once I add the next column. To begin with, I want to show the wrong way to do this. Normally this is the correct way, but it won't be correct in this case. Normally when your model looks like this, where you have this direct relationship, you shouldn't use the person column from the tblRecords because of the relationship. I should be using this one because this is on the one side. If I try to add this person here, it's now been filtered, and then I would add, well, what devil did they kill on that day? If I then add department from tblPersons, I would see independent, 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 public safety, independent, independent. And that's exactly what I expect. But I want to be able to filter my table based on the department. If I start out adding department from the tblPerson and then turn that into a slicer, what I'll see is when I've selected independent, I get the 3 original rows for Denji, which was exactly what I don't want. And when I select public safety, I only get Kobeni, but here I expect to see the 3 original rows for Denji, as we can see here. And that's exactly because of the relationship between tblPersons and tblRecords, which means that because in this table, Denji is associated with independent, when I then use this column and this column, I will only see Denji as independent, which isn't correct. And I actually struggled with this for a bit, which you can't see because this isn't my working report. But the solution is simply that instead of using this department and this person, I should simply use this department instead. I can still use person from the tblPersons table. If I try changing this, changing the name of the page, we can see what happens if I switch the slicer to be the department from tblPerson and the slicer from department from tblRecords. This would be tblPerson, and then this would be tblRecords. I get independent from tblRecords, and because in this table in tblRecords I have only 2 rows with independent, I get exactly what I expect. So it doesn't matter that Denji currently is independent. When I switch the slicer around to show public safety, I will get the original rows for Denji, because when I'm in the tblRecords table, it doesn't care that his current department is independent because I only see that in tblPersons. And this can be relevant in a work case if you have employees that switch departments, which was something I had to deal with, where I needed to know not how many people are currently employed in this department. I needed to know how many were employed in the month that I'm specifically looking at. Meaning it doesn't help that the tblPersons table tells me that there are 20 people employed in that department. I need to know how many were employed in that month, which I could get around with by using the work document that they use and then count how many unique people do they have. This isn't completely accurate because you could have a person who is employed in that department, but for whatever reason they didn't work in that month. Maybe they had a very long vacation or sickness. But the point is that in most situations, when you have a model here with a one-to-many relationship, you should be using the column from the one side instead of from the many side. That is, you should use the primary key and not the foreign key. In a situation like this, you need to discard that idea because it will give you a wrong answer. Because the problem here again is that because this department comes from tblPersons, I get all of Denji's work when he was in public safety because this is actually wrong. Which means if I add both department columns, we can see that, yeah, this comes from the wrong table and this comes from the right table. And again, because Kobeni is the only person currently employed in public safety, she's the only one that will show up when you use a slicer on this specific column from this specific table. Meaning you really have to mind what column you use. To make a closing comment, normally what I do on this page is correct, using the one side as my slicer and using the one side as my columns. But in this specific instance, I actually need to do what would be worst practice, which would be to use the department column from the data table and not from the lookup table. That was everything I had. So yep,